why are people not respecting your boundaries? There could be a bunch of different reasons, but I'm going to talk about three main ones. So if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with my weekly videos on mental health related topics and helpful coping skills for you to apply in your own everyday lives. So people aren't respecting your boundaries. You kind of have an idea of how you're doing it. You're setting them. Maybe you watched my other video of how I'm setting the steps and stages of how to set clear boundaries. If you haven't, be sure to check that out first. So I talk about setting what you want and need. You're being very clear of what your goal is. You're expressing what your intention is and being a broken record about these boundaries we're setting. And now people are still violating them, but why? So here is the top three reasons of why I see people are not respecting your boundaries. The first one is they're just not used to them, right? They're not used to you having boundaries. They're not used to boundaries in general. They kind of get what they want and need, and maybe they have a history just kind of pushing through to get what they want and need. Now, some people might classify that as persistent. Some people would classify that as like really negative and not cool, which is what I would say. So if somebody is violating your boundaries, then obviously that's really not cool, and that's why we're here watching this video. So they're just not used to boundaries. So they have that personality type that is just not a fan of them, not liking them. They're not used to boundaries being applied to them. They're not used to you applying boundaries. So for example, me as a therapist, I'm very clear on my boundaries. As soon as I start therapy, I tell my clients what they can expect from me, what they can ask from me, and what they cannot, and my rates, what I could do, my hours, things like that. So that's my professional boundaries. If I see you out in public, I'm gonna pretend like I don't know you for confidentiality's sake and privacy's sake for myself. That's part of my professional boundary. And then I have personal boundaries. So people that I interact with, friends, family, I have my personal boundaries of these are off-limit topics. I don't want to entertain them. I don't want to hear about your political views or whatever this is, right? That's your business, here's mine, and here's my boundary. Now, of course, even as a therapist, professionally and personally, I get people that try to cross those boundaries. And the first one is they're just not used to it, right? They are kind of triggered by it. They're thinking, like, well, Gabriel, you were so chill before. You let me go over in our session before, right? Instead of 45 minutes or 50 minutes, you let me do an hour and a half. Why can't I do that now? Or personal relationship. Hey, Gabriel, we talked about this before. How come I can't bring it up to you anymore? Right? So they're not used to it, and they think that there should be some exception because maybe you made that exception before. Maybe you were more open and willing, and just like the limits of consent, sometimes my mind changes and I'm allowed to make that change and I'm allowed to make that boundary. So that's one way to think about it of why people are not respecting your boundary. Doesn't really do anything for us other than understanding it. And then at the end, we'll talk a little bit more of what to do to reinforce those boundaries. The second one is they just simply don't respect the boundary, right? Once again, they don't like them, they don't respect them. It's affecting them in some negative way, and they want to bend that rule or boundary from you. So for example, my professional boundary, my limit to time is, Monday through Thursday, this hour to this hour, and here's a time frame for a session. Well, people want more. Why not, right? They're paying me money to talk to them, give them advisement, or listen to them. They might want more time. They might feel like their time is not enough for them, and they want more, even though I set that therapeutic boundary of here's a therapeutic hour and our time is up, coming to an end. So they just don't like it, right? Because it's affecting them in some negative way. They want more. So in a personal boundary, maybe I'm constantly that go-to guy, right? You could always count on Gabriel. Just hit him up. He'll drive us to the airport, right? He's done it so many times, and he's really nice and empathetic and supportive. Yeah, I am. But I just can't do it every time. And if I set that boundary that I am not that guy anymore, people are going to dislike that, right? They're going to start pushing on it because now it's negatively affecting them. And then the third common reason of why they are not respecting your boundaries is they just simply want to test them, right? Well, how real is Gabe being right now about this boundary? Can I really not go past my 45-minute mark? Can I really not call him past a certain time? Is he really not going to help me out with this situation if I really were to ask him and push on that boundary? So they're going to be testing it because they don't believe that the consequence is probably real. So in my previous video, I talked about setting the stage of how I'm doing these boundaries. I set the intention of what I want and need. I give the boundary, and then I talk about what the consequences of violating that boundary. So if I'm in a professional setting and I'm getting these three things and people are not respecting my boundary, I let them know, hey, you know what? The time is coming to an end, so I'm gonna have to end the call. If you keep pushing, I'm gonna have to hang up, right? Because I have other clients I have to go to. I have kids I gotta take care of. I have my own personal and professional life I have to deal with. So it's reiterating those consequences. So these three tips, what do we do with it, right? We know they don't like it, right? They're not used to us having it. They don't respect the boundary because it's infringing on what they want, and they don't believe in the consequence. So how do we get past that? I am going to do another separate video in a lot more detail, but once again, here's the highlights. We set our boundary very clearly of what we want and need. It's not a request. It's not a discussion. I don't even have to give information of why I'm setting the boundary. I don't tell people why I'm not doing this anymore. I don't explain myself of why I can't go over the 50-minute mark, or why I don't work certain hours, or why I'm a virtual telehealth therapist, because it's nobody's business, to be honest, right? So when you are setting your boundaries, what I see a big mistake with a lot of people is they're giving too much information and rationale or reason, almost like they have to defend their boundary. You don't have to defend your boundary. So I don't drink. I never drank in my life. And I would get questioned about this a lot. I go to events or parties like, oh, why don't you just take a sip? Why don't you take this? Why don't you drink? And pressing. Whereas I don't have to explain any of that stuff. I just have to say no thank you and stop offering to me because I just don't want to. I don't have to give an explanation. Right? So that would be the biggest tip that I would have, is stop explaining why you have a boundary. And once again, what's the intention of setting that boundary? I'm trying to focus on my own self-improvement, my self-worth, my mental health. I'm taking care of myself. Once again, I don't have to explain why, but that's my intention, taking care of myself. I want to improve this dynamic with you. I want to improve our relationship. I want to maintain a professional relationship. That's my intention with my wants and needs. And then I'm constantly being a broken record about that, while reminding the person that I'm setting boundaries with of what the consequence is going to be. If you continue to push on me about this, I'm going to have to end this, right? I'm gonna have to end this conversation. I'm gonna have to put you on a timeout. I'm gonna have to step away, not gonna entertain this discussion anymore. And most importantly, you have to be willing to follow up with that consequence. So don't put kind of an outlandish consequence of a boundary infringement that you're not willing to set. So if somebody continues to ask me, hey, Gabriel, can you see me this weekend? I don't work weekends. So if they ask me, can you see me this weekend? I'm like, hey, you ask me again, I'm going to terminate your treatment. Well, I'm not really. I don't really want to terminate somebody over something like that. But I'm going to say, hey, you know what? Like, if this schedule doesn't work for you, right, then maybe we've got to find another therapist. I just can't continue to entertain this request. I don't work weekends. I was very upfront with that. And it's just not going to happen, right? If it's a personal boundary, I'm saying that personal consequence, hey, you continue to call me at 10 o'clock or after hours, and I just can't tolerate that, right? Because I'm doing my X, Y, or Z. It's for my own personal health of what time I go to bed or do my own things, right? And if they continue to call, I'm going to set that consequence. Hey, I'm going to have to put you on Do Not Disturb, or I'm going to have to block your number at these certain times and not entertain these phone calls at all if you continue to violate this boundary. Okay? So those are just some quick tips and reasons of why people are not respecting your boundaries. For more videos on boundary setting, or if you have any questions, comment below, and be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with my weekly videos on mental health related topics and helpful coping skills for you to apply in your own everyday lives.